I do think there is a certain uh, potential to be lulled into a temptation of arrogance that, oh, we've got this magic technology, we can solve all these problems. But that's not necessarily true.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Automated Lawyer Podcast. I am one of your hosts, John Fritz, and I'm joined with my co-host, Dan Schnurbush. Dan, what is going on this wonderful Monday morning?
Morning, John. Just, we had our first 80-degree day yesterday, so I think we spent most of the day outside, and it's always nice. It's always nice to get back to nature. And you were just talking offline about, how much our phones and technology and our businesses can, if you let it, just take, swallow your whole presence, your ability to be present in the moment and pay attention to your kids and see what's going on and talk to your wife. And on days like that, it is easier to shut that stuff down and stay focused. So had a good weekend. How about yourself?
Yeah, weekend was great. Spent a lot of time in my backyard. My daughter and I designed a new grow box for our vegetable garden that we do every year. And since we have a new house, I had to create a new space. And then of course it was started out as like this 13 by or 14 by 10 or 15 square. And then once we started getting into it, I realized that a U shape would be better, that you can walk into in the middle of.
I like that.
And so we have been going to Home Depot buying, cedar plank boards and, boards to build it. And so I finally got it built. And then this weekend, after I think I put 80 bags of soil into it, we got that in, and then and so I actually got the stuff planted. So my daughter and I, is kind of one of the things we love doing each year is having a huge, massive garden. And she's a purist. She likes to use seeds. So I cheat with the little starter plants,
Yeah.
But it was great though. It was great.
Yeah. I know I have mixed success with seed starts. Every year I throw out like a smattering of things, and only like 10%, only like 10% of it ever comes out. But my wife is always getting vegetables and things like that. We got a strawberry patch in the back and
Nice.
an asparagus. I tell you, fresh asparagus is so much better than like regular store-bought grocery. I don't know what the difference is, but it's just an order of like we cooked some asparagus out of the garden the other day, and we had it with a steak dinner, and I was like, this asparagus is almost as good as the steak. Like I don't know what it is, man. It's wild. It's been growing for like 4 years, so it's got this giant crown and shoots these things up every day.
That's awesome. I've never went on that path, but I'm really big into lettuce. So I have I think I have like 75 lettuce plants of different types.
Wow.
I have spinach and kale and
we need to
3 or
do
4
that.
different types of lettuce themselves, like butter crunch versus romaine. It's the best, but it tastes so much better than anything store bought. It actually tastes like real stuff.
We need to do that. We need to do that because the lettuce and the kids eat strawberries like they're going out of season, literally. That's interesting. Have you automated your watering of your vine?
You know what? I honestly, I've looked into it, and I actually was going to build a greenhouse this year, but decided against it. With some solar on it. But
Yeah.
no, the watering is kind of like a therapeutic thing where I go to my hose, and every morning was part of my routine. I go out and I water the plants and kind of check on them. So like if it was automated, I think it takes away
It takes away. I can respect that.
of the peace of mind and kind of like the nurturing, right, of the plant.
Yeah. In the moment of Zen meditation, getting out there with the rake and drawing lines in the stone as they do and stuff. I've always wanted those, like a meditation garden. But I don't know if I'd actually do it. It looks cool. So today we've got a couple of things we're going to talk about, but one of the things that seemed, I know that we keep coming back to this, but things keep happening. And, Make.com announced their AI agent builder. It's in beta right now. It's not available to everybody. Unfortunately, my account does not have it, but one of my clients' accounts who I have access to does. So I know this is live. and I can see how it works, and it's really cool and it's really easy to set up. So this kind of begs this question of, you know, are agents, here? Are they useful? Is now the time to start examining these things? What can I actually do that is more useful than just a standard automation? So I think those are some of the things we're going to be getting into today.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll just ask you. So when I know that, I've been seeing some of your posts on your Facebook page and, a lot of excitement, right? When
Yeah.
Dan gets excited about some sort of tech on the Facebook page, everyone kind of dials in and goes, what is this? What is this? What is this something I need to be doing, et cetera? So what is so cool about the AI agents, or what is getting you excited about? Is it just the kind of bigger picture, like progression of functionality over time of what it could do, or is it where we at right now and what it is doing, and what, if anything, is it, what's the functionality on a micro level?
I think that's a really good question. I think part of what is exciting to me is that it feels like a new advancement in the substrate, or like the foundation layer that everything else can get built off. And I don't know specifically what to be excited about, but what I'm excited about is the fact that other people will figure out really cool things to do with it. I believe so. And I think it's a little bit of a mistake, I think, and it was a mistake I was going into originally, is trying to start from the front and say, all right, I'm just going to build an agent and I'll figure out what to do with it. I think the better approach is to start with a problem and then see whether an agent is an appropriate solution for that problem. Because sometimes the answer is no. And I feel like you're just going to be disappointed if you just start trying to build these agent systems and trying to squeeze them into places where they're not needed, or you've already got something that's functional. It's like, what is the actual value add here?
Yeah.
So I guess that's my answer. Is I'm excited about the tool set, and whether it turns into something practically useful. I think for a lot of people remains to be seen. I have a few ideas that I obviously can't yet deploy, but I have a few ideas about systems that I think will potentially be improvements over what we're doing now. For other people, it may be a major improvement. For us, it might be more marginal over what we're already doing, but I don't know. That's how I'm kind of thinking about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think your point about creating an agent for a specific use case is really important to understand. And I think that, you can, if the ability to build an agent to do X, right, is just very simple, and just teaching it one little piece, right? I think we try to basically build one thing for it to be useful across everything, right? Because it's just easier that way. But I think if we start with the process of one agent for one use case, and then just simply to add another agent for another use case, another agent, and then each agent has its own little micro piece. It's basically, and then they all work in unison, or maybe some agents talk to other agents, on an individual level. But,
Yeah.
I think that's important to do that. I mean, I'm always very pragmatic in how I, introduce technology these days, and it has to be basically you know, what is my bottleneck, or what is my growth area, or what's the most important problem for my law firm right now? Not,
I
is that a cool thing to add, right?
Yeah.
And so looking through that lens, I have some ideas about, you know, um, agents, or at least an agent to be able to, I'd like to be one, organizational stuff. Okay. Simply going in and looking at, a big picture analysis. Okay. Something like when you have like all of your cases in Airtable or a file vine from my law firm, right? Going in and going through and maybe analyzing all the messages from clients, all the information, because like file vine is like a mothership for us. We have functionality and other uses through case status is our communication platform. A lot of automations take place. Not all of them take place in case status, because it's very robust when it comes to the ability to build in automations. But having that agent to go like, do like a case management review and go through
Yeah.
each case, right? And there's a messages tab where all the communication, all the documents, basically all the activity in the cases are, right? Provide that summary, or just simply say like, hey, here's all of our cases on a case list. Here's what needs to take place, and the next step is in this case, and then organizing them based upon deadlines reviews, right? Reviewing
Yeah.
deadlines to see what cases are coming up first, right? Like doing that sort of organizational process, and creating basically lists of, organizing taskful lists too as well, right?
Yeah.
I think is something that would be really helpful for my law firm right now when it comes
Yeah.
to a use case.
Yeah. I figured out this morning how to create kind of an individual case summary that you could presumably scale across the entire into something like that across the entire system. But like you could, because the way that these systems work, the way that they're building a lot of these in the different AI agent builders, and what we're likely to see continuing out of OpenAI with their retrievals API and all that stuff is basically what you do is you pick a model, you pick a brain, if that's Claude or if it's ChatGPT or if it's something else. And then what the make system does, and N8N works the same way, is you give it a brain and then you give it tools. And those tools are basically just miniature scenarios, like you're familiar with your Zapier scenario, your make.com scenario, where it's like a module but instead of a whole flow of things, it's just a module or two. It's maybe it's a get matter module because we want it to have the ability to fetch a matter out of our case management system. And maybe it's just a get text message thread because we want it to have the ability to fetch in the last 3 months of text message communication with the client. It's just a single or maybe one or two modules that allow it to bring this information in. And what that's doing is it's essentially allowing the model to bring relevant information into context with a quick API call. In this case, it's using these different endpoints through the API. And that's essentially what you're doing in Make or Zapier. Well, in this case, in Make, is you're giving it a tool by just giving it the ability to execute that module whenever it needs to. And it uses its own brain. And that's what distinguishes like a traditional automation from an agent, is that the agent, well, one of the things is that an agent is kind of able to dynamically decide, okay, the prompt asked me to send an email to Jane Smith about scheduling an appointment. I have access to the module that lets me get contact record. I will use that to get Jane Smith's contact information. Oh, and I have a Gmail send email module. I will use that to outreach and contact her. And so it's not a prescribed, predefined flow. It's instead giving it the ability to depending on the prompt, which could be anything. It's dynamically giving it the ability to sort through and choose the functions that it needs in order to execute and complete the task that you gave it. It's not quite at the level of, it's not the same as like Operator, for example, where it'll go off for an hour and like go do something that you told it to do. These kind of agents are not really designed for that. But Operator and stuff doesn't have any context. Like it can't access Airtable or Filevine or any of your other things, right? It may be able to eventually, soon, hopefully, but it can't now. So that seems to me to be the main distinction, is that these newer kind of like agentic systems built into these automation platforms are kind of, you give them the tools, they're going to give you a response based on way better context, and it's going to dynamically choose from. So where that goes for people, I think is going to be crazy. We'll see what people come up with. But anyway, this is a long response to your point, is that I think that is possible to do, of getting that holistic context about a case. So we're there. It's just a matter of building it.
Yeah. And like we talked about offline is, as, this technology develops, so does the third parties, or at least the case management parties, the Filevines, the Clios, all them, to just build in their own agents, right? And functionality within their systems, right? Which is going to happen. I mean, I know that Filevine was talking about AI agents, 6 months ago or a year ago, right? Just, in some of the stuff they were previewing. Now, FileVine is, it's a personal injury based platform, and a lot of their technology comes out for, personal injury kind of law firms stuff, which is not what we do. But hopefully there's some more generic AI agents that you can kind of select and have them do certain things within the platform itself. But, it still makes me, I'm still in that boat, and I know where you stand on this, but I'm still in the boat of, even though, I don't want ChatGPT or Claude or any of those other platforms to have access to confidential and privileged information when it comes to, client communications, for example, or case information, right? So unless there's, this, kind of shift, or at least I'd be more comfortable if it was natively integrated right into FileVine, where it's okay. Now I can go through the entire case management system, and they have their they have their bolt on for their dashboards, right? That's extra, that they charge you extra for. But I think it would be really easy to have, for FileVine or any of these management systems to build on an agent that can go in and look through stuff, right? Just go through and just search my cases and tell me some cool stuff. Tell me what, you know what I mean? Like, the ability to analyze information and maybe, within the system itself. I mean, there's just so many cool things that could be happening right now within your case management system. And for you, obviously it's, with Airtable is, you're bolting on another piece of it, but I wouldn't be surprised if Airtable came out with their own, technology to basically to play within their own system. I mean, why wouldn't they? They're a massive company. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, they have, I know they have some Airtable AI stuff, which is fairly primitive in that, you can have it like summarize, you can have a prompt in an AI field that will like summarize the contents of the record or summarize the contents of a PDF in an attachment field or something like that. But nothing like complex workflows, for example. And it's not agentic. It's just a kind of a natural language summary of fields and stuff like that. I'm sure people have gotten really creative with those, but I tend to do the AI stuff outside of that. But I think that I think it was Google, like just within the last like week, came out with, we've talked about model context protocol before from Anthropic, where basically they're creating a standard protocol for language models to be able to interface with software. So like basically, how you have Zapier right now, you plug in and you have all these different functions that you can do as soon as you authenticate Zapier to your FileVine account. Well, it's going to be the same thing with language models once model context protocol is more ubiquitous, where you just plug it in and the language model will have access to all those functions and the agent will be able to dynamically do all those things. But I think Google just came out with a new system like last week, not a competing protocol, but like a supplementary protocol that is designed for agent to agent communication. So if you have like an external agent that is contacting Google's servers, it can then say, hey, Google agent, all the magical things that Google agent can do, can you run this, function set or workflow sequence and then return the results to me or something. So we're kind of just further expanding this like interoperability thing, which I think is going to be the rest of the story of 2025. 2025? We're in 25, right? Jeez.
Yeah. So here's kind of like what I'm, where my brain's going when it comes to, my law practice. I have Eleanor. I love Eleanor. Eleanor's great when it comes to, just day-to-day question, anything related to probate, right? She's pumping out the answer, right? Or very close to it, is getting you 95% there. Really helpful. But I want to take it to the next level and not specifically, Eleanor, but I want to build something where what I do as the the overseer on my team, right? When it comes to, probate, right? So there's, we have all of our processes and workflows, right? And different things that happen, right? There, we have our automation platform, that the way the case moves through the processes, it goes through. And then it gets to the it's time for John to approve everything. So I approve everything before it goes out, right? I want to make sure everything is spot on. There's not mistakes. Very rarely does any mistakes not get caught in the process. If there's a small mistake, it gets caught before it goes to the client, right? So we want to make sure there's no mistakes when it comes to client communications or client work or work product or court filings or anything, right? So, but where we're kind of not bottlenecking, but kind of right now is me when it comes to the review process, right? Because all my team members are putting stuff together, they're getting everything prepped and all that stuff, sort of stuff. So, what we do as lawyers is it's not rocket science. Okay. There's a lot of prior experience that is involved in our decision making and why we do certain things based upon whether it's venue or a judge or just this particular issue. But I want to build something where I can have my sort of checklist of like, I can go through and like make it really on a micro level of SKU by SKU. We have 7 or 8 SKUs of probate types, right? And that we work on, but go through and basically provide instructions for each SKU on what a review model should look like, right? And so what the person does is they upload their documents, right? They upload their death certificate, they upload their probate documents that they've drafted, they upload everything. And then the agent or the bot or the GPT or whatever it is, right, follows my step-by-step instructions that I pre-programmed it to do to go through and scan everything and look at everything and say, all the dates are correct. All the names are spelled correctly. All the stuff is done. Is there debts in this case? Prompting a message back to the person who, in the production team who produced it, right? Asking questions, pointing questions, same questions I would ask in my review. I think it's very easily impossible to do that, given all the tools we have right now, to be able to take some of this stuff off of the review stuff off my plate where it's, and obviously there'd be a lot of testing involved, there'll be a lot of testing when it comes to how accurate can we get it to work. But again, if you're scanning and pulling information off of a death certificate or pulling information out of the case management system or, looking at assets and information in the system and then comparing it to what's on the forms, et cetera. And I don't think it would be that difficult to build something right now to start reviewing stuff internally, right? Probably more accurate than myself once you program it properly, right? What do you think?
It's an interesting use case. It's a big thing, right? Because you'd have to have a lot of different tools. It certainly seems plausible. You could have tools that fetch in case information, fetch in relevant contact records, fetch in the date of death and all that stuff. Fetch in any file documents such as the death certificate and stuff like that, and that would bring everything into context. And then you could have, and I guess the document, the petition itself or the pleading itself that you're working on, and have that. The trick, I think, would be a technical one, not necessarily like a system design one. Would be getting the AI to actually be able to see the PDF pleading correctly, and like extracting the input information correctly to actually read if you filled it out in a certain way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've had difficulty in the past of getting models to
read PDFs.
Be able to, read PDFs, because PDFs, most people don't realize PDFs are a really old file type format, and they're kind of they're not very efficient, and because they often work between like converting stuff between images and text, and computers have a hard time doing those conversions sometimes. OCR image like algorithms.
You have to OCR it before. OCRing it helps out and basically zooming in on and basically cleaning up the vision clarity of how clean it is.
And I guess you could, because like when you have like fillable fields, for example, like how are those being interpreted with that? But as long as you could work out those like technical hiccups, you could certainly get it to the point where it knows everything it needs to know in order to answer the question. It has your brain as far as the things that it should be looking for and the historical experience. You could type that in and be like, hey, in this county, we normally do this, yada, yada, yada. And,
I don't see why you couldn't. I mean, you could probably have like some sort of push button where you put files, you put documents into a folder, right? A review folder, and then you push a button somewhere, and then it fetches everything from the folder, pulls it
Yeah.
in, reviews
Certainly.
it, and then
Yeah.
comes up, goes through its internal audit checklist that I provided it, provides a report on, all the things that I wanted to do when it comes to the checklist. And then maybe my review is simply like super high level and it takes 8 seconds, right? It's like, okay, hey,
Yeah.
well, let's review these two things, as opposed to, a 10-step checklist of doing the checks and balances. So that's kind of
Right.
more like where I'm looking for when it comes to spending my time, which is how do I really
Mhm.
solve the problems that I'm actually, having with my law firm, being able to grow it and provide better client
Yeah.
services.
That kind of issue gets back into this like perennial question that we juggle, wrestle with on a regular basis is like, if even if we can build an agent, does it make more sense just to have a team member that is well trained and that you trust to execute on that thing? Obviously, obviously a team member is way more expensive than a robot, but at the same time, like to what degree does that delegation extend into other areas, and how do we like, does it make sense to have just an attorney there in that function? That's something that I've wondered about as well. Is these last few pieces that I still am involved in as an attorney, like going to court, for example. Um, but the frustrating thing is like things like that don't happen in most cases, at least in our practice, don't happen often enough to like justify a full time person. So we're like kind of in this
Yeah.
weird limbo spot where it's like so much stuff is automated. We don't really need a person to do most of that stuff, but we still need somebody to be here in person. But we don't have enough in person stuff for somebody to be a full time job. It's like we've got to kind of almost got to scale into a fit there. It's kind of an interesting spot, but
Well,
I
that's
am
exactly what it is. You either are going to be you and plus automation forever, or you have to scale into somebody replacing you. And
yeah.
and scaling to somebody replacing you. I mean, when you have that's so much automation built in and certain like really great team members who are making everything go forward, like in my capacity is still, I mean, I still have massive amounts of capacity to even, double my caseload, right? Within our own current model. So it's at what point, does it make sense to hire somebody to replace you? And like,
Right.
I don't know. We're just right now, we're simply signing up and working up and, as many possible cases as we can constantly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
until we get to that point where, um, maybe it does make sense to hire that lawyer because then they can do the review function and the in-person
Yeah.
function when it comes to hearings. And then I
It,
can focus on higher level marketing, brand awareness from that perspective.
it does feel like something that's a little bit, and I'm sure there are other practice areas that are like this too, but because probate, for example, is so paralegal heavy, is so administration heavy, that the role of the attorney it can be so small that to get to the point where you have a full time or even a part time attorney's position worth of stuff, you actually have to grow the organization pretty substantially. I mean, you could look at having, I don't know
Or
what would you
paralegals at
pay?
least.
Like, yeah, like 4 paralegals for each one attorney or something like that. I mean, if in a well automated practice, um, you'd have to go up quite a bit, I think, before it actually makes any sense. Um,
I think that if, yeah, I think I need to hire, I mean, we have two paralegals now. And I think I need to hire two more paralegals in order to be able to have a full-time lawyer,
mhm.
to be able to have them do, most of the review stuff. I mean, I probably maybe one more, but then again, you want to basically, maximize your potential because you have that, $100,000, expense, right?
Right.
When it comes to hiring a lawyer. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting though. It's a very interesting, I
Mhm.
constantly find myself analyzing and big picture analysis on the traditional law firm scaling versus the automated law firm scaling and the pros and
Uh-huh.
cons of both. Honestly, it's really interesting because when we got into, at least when I got into my practice, um, I always said I don't want to be that law firm that has, that scales by putting bodies in seats. You know what I mean? I want it to be not that I wanted to be fully automated or not that it's possible, but but I want it to be a hybrid, right? I want half as many, seats as the traditional law firm of just putting bodies in seats and billing hours. Um, but I'll tell you what, there's a reason why those law firms were built on that model, right? For a number of different reasons. So it's really interesting to kind of constantly be looking back and going, okay, what can I take from the traditional law firm model and also incorporate those really big pros, right,
Yeah.
into the hype, the automated version of it. But again, there's reasons why, you know, Brian Cave, Hush Blackwell, these large law firms in St. Louis and these national firms, there's reasons why they're still on the billable hour. There's reasons why they're growing and have massive number of attorneys working there, as opposed
Yeah.
to now, of course, they're implementing automation, but there are core reasons why that model is the most profitable for them in that sort of context. Now, it's different for us and different for practice areas and all that sorts of stuff, but it's still interesting to reflect on that and say, okay, how do I solve the current problem on my plate? And is this a technology piece or is this a traditional law firm piece that would make sense, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's absolutely true, and it's a great point about there being stuff to learn from the way that law firms have been run because they've been run this way for hundreds of years or something like that.
Yeah.
Their technology is brand new, so I do think there is a certain potential to be lulled into a temptation of arrogance that oh, we've got this magic technology, we can solve all these problems. But that's not necessarily true. Like there are human problems that need to be solved. There are law firms today that have no, and I've been involved in some of them, and I'm sure many of our listeners are falling into this category, that they don't have a ton of automation, but their processes are tight. They're human-driven process. I was at an auto body shop dropping off the van, and I'm sitting there dropping off the van. She's going through a folder, a paper folder of all of their appointments for the day and what it is and what it's here for. And she, scribbled on her handwritten thing, my car was here. But she did it with such like trained efficiency. She knew what she was doing. She knew the system. She executed on the system correctly. And I'm sure they have problems and it's not well done all the time and so on and so on. And could it be more efficient? Sure. But a totally manual process that was being executed well. And I've always had good client experience with that auto body shop. And it is very interesting that now, are their costs higher than they probably otherwise would be? Sure. But they're still running a competent shop where their clients are getting good service without using hardly any technology. So how do we draw lessons from that and integrate the best of both worlds without over-indexing on either side? That's kind of, I think, the puzzle.
Yeah, and I think the answer, the end product is always the client experience, right? Is the client satisfied with their experience? Will they return to you? Will they talk about you as a brand, as a company, as a service, right, in the community?
Mm-hmm.
And if the answer is yes, how do we get there, right? Yeah, it's really, really interesting. Like I said, it's, sometimes I get focused, or I have been focused in the past, let's just say a couple of years on, a lot of technology, right? And, I think sometimes you lose sight of, you might get a little bit blinded by technology when it comes, as opposed to like, what does the client truly want? Am I solving a problem that the client actually, wants? And we talked about this recently, but just kind of bigger picture stuff. But,
Yeah.
it's really interesting. And like I said, I love going back and, because there is a lot of law firms. There's law firms in Missouri and stuff. I spend a lot of time on the, at least I monitor the listservs, right? When it goes to, rebar listservs for probate, for estate planning, for the Missouri solo stuff. There's just a lot of interesting insights I think you can pick up on those when it comes to lawyers solving problems and how they work, right? And it's interesting because a lot of people on there don't have any technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
But some of them are the most successful probate litigators in Missouri, or trust litigators in Missouri, or trust, estate planners in Missouri, right?
Sure.
Or personal injury lawyers in Missouri. Like, how do they work and function in their environment? And again, every environment is different. Every practice area is different, but it's still interesting to look at those and see what's going on.
So I think we've been appropriately cautious throughout this conversation, but I do want to throw out, we're coming close on time, so I do want to throw out a couple of areas where I do think people should be exploring in law firms, whether it makes sense to build and implement an agent. I've got 5 different core areas. One is in scheduling. So I think a lot of our stuff right now is pretty easy to automate scheduling. If you have a receptionist, or if you have just a sequence in your email workflow where it, texts people the link or emails people the link to schedule when they need it. I think all that's great. But having a centralized agent built that has all the tool functions to access your calendar and see your availability and use Calendly or whatever to schedule you, I think could have especially useful either as part of a workflow or kind of like ad hoc scheduling, where you can just send a message, be like, hey, I need a meeting with, Jim Smith next week sometime. Can you get that set up? And it has tools for your calendar, for your email, for the contact database. And it's just able to pull that information, pull your calendar, reach out to Jim, say, hey, Jim, we need to get an appointment on the calendar for next week. Dan wants to talk about XYZ with you. Can we do this? Here's some dates that'll work. Here's a link to our calendar if you'd rather self-schedule. And then it has the ability to go back and forth via email or text message and actually get that appointment set up. That, I think, is a pretty cool, pretty helpful thing to just be able to execute that. Most people have many people have assistants or executive assistants or other people or paralegals or whoever that could execute on that. But I really think that would be a super easy agent to build that is going to cost you pennies to run instead of whatever the person costs. I think that could be pretty effective. I think there's opening for an email triage agent. If you are one of those attorneys who's comfortable with ChatGPT and Claude and so on, having more access to your email, I think you could be running more of these emails through and then allowing the agent to do things like detect the kind of email. Is it a court email? Okay, what is it saying? Does this merit a stage change in our case management system? Yes. Okay, then I'm going to update the stage. Does this need us to generate any new tasks? The client sent us an email saying, hey, I need you to get me this. All right. That sounds like a task to me. Let's generate a new task in the case management system connected to the case file. I have the ability to find it. So just kind of following up and triaging emails, generating a draft response, even if you don't trust it to actually respond yet. Generating a draft response when equipped with context. I think that could be pretty cool. So email triaging, I think there's a lot of potential value there. In that same vein, client care associate, I think you could build a client care associate agent that could retrieve data about your case file status pretty reliably. And let's say a client reaches out, hey, just checking in. I want to know what's going on with my case. Agent pulls all the information, generates a little 1-paragraph summary, sends it back. I think you could probably do that without a lot of trouble, depending on how much, or at least generate a draft response rather than if you don't trust it, you have to just shoot it off. Case management, on the vein of what you and I talked about earlier, I think you probably could generate an agent that could pull out full lists of cases and determine statuses and deadlines. I think you could do some stuff with that. And then paper mail triage. So inbound paper mail, if you're digitizing your paper mail, we have an automated system right now, but it's very complicated. It has a lot of branching paths and if-then statements and yada, yada, yada to make it work. I think you could make a much simpler version of that with just an agent that has access to your case management system, and it can read the PDFs as they come in from Earth Class Mail or wherever you get your mail scanned in through, and then give it the ability to dynamically decide which case does this go to, rather than running these complex automation systems that I build. Could we just give the agent a brain and teach it to sort on its own? I think the answer is probably yes. So those are some immediate, obvious candidates for me that I think could make sense. But it's really going to depend on your particular practice, what your particular pain point is that you're finding. what's the pain point? Start there again. I think I mentioned at the beginning, start with a pain point and then work backwards. Can I build an agent that helps me with this? Or is a more traditional automation going to be more appropriate? And so on. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents on areas to explore for folks as these new agentic tool builders are rolling out. Have fun with it.
Sounds
That's all
good.
I got.
The only thing I'd throw in there is, this is, I guess, this is our ending tech tip here, tips, that sounds like. But the only thing I'd throw out is, if you're not keeping track of KPIs, that might be something that might be really helpful to build a KPIs agent that can go in and analyze cases, tell you the stuff you want to know, as opposed to having to, fetch data from certain areas to try to build a dashboard where it pulls data in. Have an agent that actually, jumps in to eat your system, analyzes, and then can think like, hey, what's something I'm missing here? We have 10 KPIs. Tell me what another useful KPI might be for a law firm. Well, this might be important to track this. Okay, start tracking that, right? Start pulling that in. So I think that, honestly, the decisions that we make as law firm owners, starting out used to be, a lot of shooting from the hip, right? When it came to, decision making and spending money and investing in certain, areas. But if you don't have your numbers dialed in, you're basically shooting blindfold. I think if blindfolded, I think you'll hit some stuff, but I think you're gonna have a lot of misses. But having those KPIs is really important thing, and just knowing your numbers down to the, super granular level, is so vital to, being able to grow your law firm in the right direction. So,
Yeah. I think that's a really good idea, because you could, in your like standard KPIs, a lot of that you're just probably going to build in dashboards and stuff. Like, let's say you wanted a particular insight. Like, I want to know within the last, like something you haven't built out the dashboard for, you just want a quick insight. I want to know, how long has it taken us to do this in this, in this case phase or what have you, among this type of cases or something like that. Could you build a kind of a real time, data analyst, essentially, a data analyst and agent? They can pull everything out of your database, because ChatGPT and Claude and stuff, they can write the code to compute the answer to anything you want to know, and then spit out a quick answer, or even a more amorphous prompt, like, find some interesting insights based on our data, or problematic insights. What is going to come back when you ask that? I'd be very interested.
Where are we bottlenecking at right now? What is slowing us down in the process? Where can we improve? And then being able to ask things like, hey, when can I want to hire another attorney? How many cases do I need to be able to replace me as the only attorney, right? Here's some basic metrics and, revenue metrics, right? What do I need? And using that as kind of a sounding board of, or, hey, what's the best person? Where am I bottlenecking at? Who should I hire next based upon my analytics? Production, intake,
That's a good one.
In review, like your NPS scores. Well, my area NPS scores have dipped slightly. Maybe we need to hire a client care manager, or maybe to spend more time. I think there's a lot of great analytics in analyzing the data, and I think we think about these agents as performing tasks, but I want to know the things that are behind me that I can't see, right? The stuff that I'm blinded to because I'm sitting at my desk all day. That's what I want to know.
That's a really good idea. That did not occur to me. I like that. I'm going to start brainstorming ways to do those.
Build it for me, and then build it for me, and then turn it over. Okay.
That's killer. That's a killer idea. That's very good. Because what kind of insights are you going to get from something that can dynamically pull data across all your systems and then into a context window and then reason over that? What kind of insights are you going to get that would have taken a huge pain in the ass to build in a dashboard, or you didn't even think to build a dashboard KPI to monitor?
100%. Because you think about it. Like there's as a business owner, there's so many things you don't know about or know to think about because you haven't experienced them, or you haven't, you're like, oh my God, I didn't even know that. And the only reason somebody else would know that is because they've experienced already. But if you have that module that can pull basically experience from, multi-sector experience, infinite experience, right? to be able to
Yeah.
reason and logic. I think that's really interesting. So I would love to
Cool.
see how we do that. If we could, maybe do another episode on that and like go down the path of how do we actually do that? Because I think that would be unbelievable for law firms to have to be able to, come up with a how to build type
Mm.
thing, or law firms to basically have that internal analytics for their loan law
Yeah.
firm to be able to ask generic questions. I mean, I think it'd be great.
Yeah. Believe me, as soon as I get into this beta, I'm going to be tinkering and playing and seeing what I can get going. I'm
Sounds
trying to
good.
get in touch with their support and like coerce them into, I need an account. Give me an account. I'm going to take
Let
my
me out.
$10 a month business elsewhere.
I have the automated lawyer podcast. Come on.
Yeah, this got to get me something.
All right. I think we're at
All
time.
right. Yep. Let's move into it. Any tech tips of the week? I got one. What I highly encourage people to check out, if you are a paid ChatGPT subscriber, it has to be Plus, Teams, or Enterprise, or anything like that. Last week, I think this is rolled out to everybody, but maybe not. But last week they rolled out full account wide memory. So no longer are your chat threads limited to that thread. ChatGPT now remembers everything across all of your conversations. So this has opened up some really cool prompts that you can ask it, like, tell me 5 things that I don't know about myself, or tell me a deep, dark secret that you found about me based on our conversations, or pull out my blind spots. What do you think my blind spots are? And I just did one earlier today that it struck me in the feels pretty hard. So I think that everybody who has a paid account should be asking those kinds of questions to the chatbot now, because it knows you a lot better than you might think now. And if it didn't before with regular memory, now that it can see everything, it really does. So pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that online. I'll kind of play on yours. I mean, I was playing with the 4.0 versus the 4.5 on ChatGPT and asking it different questions, and kind of just seeing the responses. I think that when it comes to the different GPT platforms there, right? The 4.0, the 4.5, and you have the I don't even know where we are. Are we at 03 preview yet? Or I don't even know where we are on that. But any of the stuff that's publicly on ChatGPT there, play with it all and ask the same question across all the platforms and see what you get as a response. I think that's really interesting because you'll get different responses, and you really need to know which one to enter your question into to get the maximum out of everything. So if you're asking us, a research question versus a higher thought question versus, or even just like, hey, I want this to analyze and pull data from a PDF and put it into an Excel file. Well, you need to know the right one to go to. Other than that, you're just wasting your time because it's not going to work, right? So play with them all across the board, and kind of see what the variances are, and also see where the data it's pulling. I always find that interesting too, is look at the answers, type the same question across all the platforms, and then really delve into what the answers are. Where is it pulling the data from? Go in, look at the citations to see where it's pulling. I think that's going to be really interesting because, eventually, and people say Google's going to go away, and but Google's going to introduce as much AI as everybody else. It's going to be the dominant guy. No one's going to lose AI search from going to ChatGPT for only searches. But
we
my
talk
point
about
is
Gemini very often. Gemini is fantastic.
Yeah, and look to see where the data is coming from, because if you're scaling your law firm and you're doing brand awareness, right, and you want your brand to appear on certain searches, you have to see where the information's coming from on these search prompts, and you'll actually get citations from it. So even look through Google. Where is Google pulling the data from? Where do I need to expand my presence online? And so really delve into that from a marketing perspective as well. So
yeah, I saw Tyson Mutrux from Maximum Lawyer. He was posting something the other day, just yesterday, where Google has now announced that they're going to be linking in their internal AI. When you Google something now, you get the AI response at the top, and then you get all the other stuff. Well, their AI responses are now going to be citing to all the articles that they use in answering your question. So if you answer like, how long does probate take in Missouri? It's going to be giving you an answer and then citing the user to the article that it found the answer from. So SEO, in my opinion, and content marketing, like everybody was like afraid we're going to go through a content marketing apocalypse because AI was just going to steal all of our knowledge and not give any credit. Turns out that that's not true. It's summarizing and giving us credit. SEO and content marketing are probably going to take a big jump, if I had to bet, over the next several months. Just a different format.
Instead of listing number one on Google, it's going to be listing or being in the pool that the data is being analyzed by Google's analytics to provide that one answer, right? So you got to. I think it's really important to know where the machine is evolving when it comes to what data it's thinking that's important, and making sure that you're in that data if that's important to you. So,
absolutely. All right, Sean, thank you. It was a pleasure talking as always. Remember, folks, if you enjoy the podcast, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. If you are interested in taking the conversation offline, join us in the Legal Tech Collective Facebook group where we talk about this stuff all the time. That's it for this week. Until next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
Yep. See you later, John.